On today's episode of The Next, our guest is Ryan Durkin, VP of AI at Work at Whoop. Whoop, of course, is the health and fitness band that I've got on my wrist here for anyone that is watching this on video. And I've known Ryan a long time since he co-founded a company called Campus Live back in the day, back in 2008, which was the same time that I founded Runkeeper. And at any rate, Ryan's done a bunch of interesting things. He worked at Wayfair for several years. He worked at Drizzly before they were acquired by Uber for $1.1 billion. He was the founder and CEO of The Operators, which was an interesting talent business that he bootstrapped to $1 million profitable company. And then he joined Ed Baker from Facebook and Uber fame at AnyQuestion as COO, which was then acquired by Whoop. At any rate, Ryan announced recently in the last few months that he took on this new role at Whoop, VP of AI at Work. And the mission of the role is helping Whoop become the number one most AI-forward workplace. Now, that certainly got my attention in terms of why a health and fitness company like Whoop would be going so deep down that path, and also what that means, what he's trying to do with the role, why it came about, how they got started with it, how it's structured internally, and how much collaboration and input he gets from other departments throughout the organization, where they've been finding success, what some surprises have been, and where Ryan thinks that all of this is going, since he's obviously got an interesting perch from which to form an opinion on that. At any rate, I won't share too much more because we should just get into it. But before we get started, I'm Jason Jacobs, and this is The Next. It's not really a show, it's more of a learning journey to explore how founders can build ambitious companies while being present for family and not compromising flexibility and control, and also how emerging AI tools can assist with that. Each week, we bring on guests who are at the tip of the spear on redefining how ambitious companies get built, and selfishly, the goal is for this to help me better understand how to do that myself while bringing all of you along for the ride. Not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. Okay, Ryan Durkin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, especially I'm not sure exactly the date this is going to publish, but the date we're recording is May 9th, which is the day after the big announcements from Whoop. So I feel a little bit like I'm talking to Craig Federighi or Eddie Q or something the day after the Apple's WWDC.
It was a big day. It was a long day. I think
you guys are like Boston and health and fitness's Apple. So
totally.
I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, because it's like, what do you mean Boston's and health and fitness? We're just Apple's Apple.
No, we'll take it. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the team was here yesterday. I think at like 4 a.m. everybody started and kept the rollout, getting everything out the door. So big day, Whoop 5.0 launch. We can talk a little bit about that as we get into it, but massive day for us to really pivot from this kind of focus on unlocking human performance and the athlete focus to health. And so we've redefined our mission. Our mission is now unlocking human performance in health span. I'm super excited about that. When I first joined the company about 2 years ago, this was like my main thing I was really hoping we would push towards. Obviously, it's a big space that can help a ton of people. And the nice thing here is everybody who comes into work, I think, has their own personal story as to why they're here. And oftentimes it spans into that health realm. So monster day for us yesterday, for sure.
I told you by email before we started recording today, but if you look at my wrist.
There we go.
Yeah. But let me frame up why I invited you on the show, and then we can get into it. The show is just, I purposely left it vague with the next because it's basically anything I want it to be. And it started out with like, how do I build different? And because as a founder, I'm setting out to build again, but can't do it in the way I used to because I have a lot more going on and I'm getting older and all that. But then it felt reckless to just anchor and build another tech company without, especially given that I was in this intermission, taking the time to understand what's happening with AI. Because while there's a lot of hype and grift and noise in the short term, it seems like the implications in the longer term will be profound. And understanding how it will affect how we work and live, how startups get built and funded, and specifically how I might be able to leverage it to build difference. That's where the journey started. And then more recently, I've been looking at, all right, what category do I love and what problem do I want to solve? And then working backwards to the tool sets. And I've spent a lot of time back in sports. So revisiting the Runkeeper days and specifically youth sports, because that's where I'm neck deep in, spending so much time outside of work with my kids. But I invited you on the show. One, you are an entrepreneur that, at least from my perception, like operates to the beat of your own drummer. So it's just interesting to learn from and talk to as a founder. Two, you're in this role at Whoop as a VP of AI, and your mission says on your LinkedIn says, number one, helping Whoop become the number one AI forward workplace, right? And you see these announcements of like Duolingo, like we're morphing into AI first, and there's all these companies making these big bold proclamations, but it's like, what does that mean? And where does that come from and why? And like, how does that help the bottom line? And right, so there's a lot to cover there. And then also just selfishly, I mean, as a big Whoop user and someone who cares a lot about my own health and fitness and longevity and quality of life and quality of sleep and all that, I'm just interested to talk shop on that and where Whoop is going, since it's an area I care about a lot. And I've got a vested interest as someone who's already upgraded to the new stuff that you just announced yesterday.
Yeah, awesome. No, I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I remember when I said to you, said, hey, we're ready to rock for tomorrow morning. And you sent me the receipt of the purchase, which I loved. But yeah.
I should have waited to see if you could have gotten me some friends and family discount or something, but I was too eager. I had to get my hands on the blood pressure stuff, amongst other things, but the blood pressure stuff in particular. I mean, and maybe it's not an official reading, or we can talk about that, but it's the fact that it's even that the stepping stones are starting to come is really exciting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'll get you some bands for sure. I'll hook you up. Where would you like to start? We could talk a little bit about the kind of AI at work initiative at Whoop. We could start there. I'm like,
why don't you just give the Whoop overview,
sure,
and then give an overview of the role. And then before we get too deep, then we can look backwards. So how you got the Whoop and how the role came about. But yeah, for starters, just frame the discussion for listeners.
Yeah, let's for sure.
If you don't mind.
Yep. So Whoop, our mission is to unlock human performance and health span. A new mission as of last week, like I mentioned, looks like this. Goes on your wrist or body. Most people wear it on the wrist, but we do have a Whoop body product line where you can wear it in, But
not yet compatible with the 5.0.
Yeah, correct.
I looked today, I was like, oh, they have apparel, but it said not compatible with my...
We've got other things on that front that we launched, which we can get into. But the main value is like 24/7 biometric tracking on your body, right? So especially now with 5.0 and being a 14-day battery life compared to kind of average 5, this thing previously never really came off my body, but like now it really won't. We've got different types of bands. There's a Sport Flex band that you can wear in the shower. So if it gets wet,
I just got that. Is that new? The one that's like a super high intensity band? I didn't see that before.
We've had that one for a bit, but it is, it's all available still on 5.0 and MG. It's one of these things where it's like, why do I care about the 24/7 wearability? And if I were to flash forward, right, I'm 38 years old right now, I'm 39. And you flash forward decades down the road, my gut says...
Flash forward to me, 48, almost 40 now.
Yeah, there you go. My gut says the more data that you have on yourself is going to be better than less, especially in the age of AI. And like my personal story as to why I care about this company is like, and we may have talked about this back in the day when I popped over to your office, but like my dad passed away from cancer when I was a kid. And if you look at cancer survival rates today compared to 35 years ago of what it was, they're not that much better. There might be 10 percentage points better. Some specific type of cancers are significantly better. Skin cancer survival rates have gotten better. But it's one of these things where I think of something like the cure for cancer as like a big puzzle, like a 1,000-piece puzzle. And we might already have like 563 pieces to the puzzle already put in, but there's another 337 pieces out there that we got to go and collect. And my gut says that a lot of those puzzle pieces are like in the data, in the human biometric data. And so for me, that's kind of what motivates me to be here. I think there's a ton of other employees internally that have their own kind of similar stories of friends and family or their own personal journeys that they've gone through as to why that matters. But this 24/7 wearability piece is a big deal. The battery life extension of 14 days is a big deal. And we can get into some of the other features as well. In terms of my role, I joined through an acquisition. So we were running a company called AnyQuestion. We're a small team of 10, founded by a guy named Ed Baker, who I've known for about like 15 years.
Who's a serious amateur athlete in his own
Very
right.
serious, yeah. He was a distance runner back at Harvard back in the day, and he'd go on to do Ironmans and win them. He called me up, I don't know, probably like would have been maybe 4 years ago at this point, and just said, like, I got this idea. It's a question and answer platform where you can go and ask professional athletes, mostly Olympians and Olympic coaches, questions, record the questions, put them up on a page, and distribute that around the world for other people to benefit in hearing their answers. Kind of like a Substack almost, but instead of it being blog posts, it was just question and answer. The company evolved into an AI company. About like 6 months into building it, ChatGPT, we knew was launching in November of whatever it was, 2022. And we said, okay, why don't we use that tool to generate new questions from the answers? Long story short, built a interesting consumer tech company, but we got an offer to join Whoop, and we're excited about it. And so we joined. This was about 2 years ago. My role for the first year was a bit of like hodgepodge of special projects, but about 6 to 8 months ago, myself.
Wait, just one question before we get into the 6 to 8 months ago. Was that a strategic fit in terms of what you were building, or was it really just the team and the skills and how the skills could be transferred?
It was the team. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Ed had historically been on the board of Whoop, so he knew the company very well. Conversations as to like where this thing could go and the opportunity, discussions around that, quite frankly, like pretty easy because he had a good visibility into the past 5 years of how the business was doing and where it was headed. And it got all of us excited. We did integrate the tech. It is kind of right now, I'm building out this little community page with a handful of people on a discourse. So we're kind of back into the Q&A world for our members, but it was the team. And everyone at the time split off into different parts of the org. We had some individuals go to engineering and rad, research and development. We had some go to marketing, some go to growth. And I just worked with Ed and a woman on our team named Liv on a handful of different projects. And then that brought us to about the 6 to 8 months ago where, I'd been here about a year and I was thinking to myself, like, what's the big opportunity here that could really leverage my skills? And as much as I love building product, like my core skill set is building teams and really like partly coaching people in their careers. This is what I did with the operators, and we built a big team at Drizzly back in the day and recruited a lot of people away for it back in the day. But I've always had this like special place in my heart for just helping people navigate life, and employees in particular. And the opportunity I saw was like, let's just level up the entire employee base here with regards to AI, first and foremost. And then also just kind of raise the bar as to new people coming in the door and making sure that they're not just AI enabled, but almost like, what would like an AI superhuman look like at Whoop 12 months from now, right? So that was back in November. We created the department. Give me a sec. And put together the mission that you described earlier around building the best AI enabled team in Boston, hopefully the East Coast. I oftentimes talk about less union between Boston and New York. I think New York has great talent down there, and I just like the kind of mix of talent going between both cities. We also have a ton of employees down in New York as well at Whoop. And then started to set off and say, okay, what does that actually mean? Like, how do we get there? And that kind of gets to, I can talk a bit about the roadmap and the strategy around it, but we've got a set number of objectives that we're trying to hit and I'd post to guide the entire company. You want me to touch more on that right now, or?
What was the business case for getting this established? And also what gave you I think about heads of sustainability, for example, because that's the world that I spent the last almost 7 years in. And there's a big difference between a company that's just going about their day to day as they were, but then they have this sustainability team and it's just, we'll take like a point or two of our marketing budget and we'll give it to them and that'll make us a green place to work or whatever. But we're not actually going to change anything. But it feels like in order for this type of role to be impactful, it really needs to start at the top and be empowered and pervasive throughout the organization in a more fundamental way. So I guess, what was the business case, and also what gave you the confidence that this wasn't just going to be window dressing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the business case really started with Will, our CEO, saying that Toby email, the Shopify email that went viral.
Well, that was another one. Yeah, I mentioned Duolingo. I didn't mention Shopify.
Yeah, I mean, while there wasn't a tweet or an email 6 to 8 months ago, there was certainly the tone that coming from Will coming from Rob Case, our head of people, coming from Ed, we worked with at Any Question, who's our chief product officer, chief growth officer, former Uber growth, former Facebook international growth, smart guys saying, we really need to lean in here. And long-term success of the business, I think, is predicated in today's world on adapting and changing quickly, right? Like you and I were building companies back in 2008, you with Runkeeper and me with Campus Live. You guys were mobile first. We had Campus Live was more desktop based. We did not adapt to mobile. We did not adapt to that time, and company ultimately fizzled out. And I don't want to live through one of those moments again, right? Like when I saw that tech shift happen when ChatGPT came out several years ago, I was like, okay, this thing is clearly monstrous, but what does that mean in terms of adapting your employee base to get everyone up to speed on usage of the tools, eventually pushing into this agentic world? How do their roles shift over time? How do responsibilities shift? Are there even job descriptions the way they're written today, or do they completely transform? These are all the things that I like working on, the problem space around org design, kind of team design, role design, this concept of the full stack builder, and someone who can do engineering and design and prototyping all together, shipping stuff on their own. That to me was an interesting space. So coming at it from the angle that it was important to Will, our CEO, it was important to the exec team. And we kind of looked around the room and I was doing a handful of special projects, but really not utilizing my core strength. And then I just sat down and had an honest conversation with Rob Case, our head of people. And he said, look, Durkin, I think you'd be great for this. So let's do it. So Rob, me, and Liv kicked it off, got the little department stood up. And by the way, I think this is an important point. Like we've been spending a lot of time talking to a handful of other companies in town. We hold AI events at Whoop every single quarter at the intersection of AI and some topic. The first one was on product. The second one was on recruiting in the people space. And the next one's on health on June 5th. And there's a ton of companies that don't have dedicated headcount or resources dedicated to this. Some clearly are due to size, right? Like if you're a company of 10 people, you're not going to reserve a full-time employee to do this necessarily. But like if you're a 100-person plus company at this point, the alternative is what's happening in town is like every employee is spending time on this, like 1 to 10%. But most companies that I've talked to, they're not really digging in, including some like really big consumer tech companies in Boston that I've spoken to, and they've got several thousands of employees, and there's no people focused internally on their people team trying to help unlock tools, number one, and get them in the hands of the people, and then coach people on them beyond LLMs, beyond ChatGPT and basic LLMs, coach people up on these tools, and then really start projecting a vision for the future. So we took the stance, okay, we're going to dedicate headcount to it. We're going to keep it on our minds 24/7, 365, and that's where we're at right now, working through our roadmap.
So when you first anchored and started to gear up to head out on the journey, where did you start? What did those first few steps look like? And how did you balance learning with doing?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, there's like the first 3 buckets of focus, I would say. The first one was, all right, let's get some champions across the org. That was number one. So most companies do this at this point, right? 6 to 8 months ago, this would have been like more unique, I guess. But now I think every company is replicating this. Whether you call it a steering committee or a guild, whatever, finding a representative from each department within your org to serve as the AI czar of their domain, who's interested in having conversations about this type of stuff and getting in the room at least once a month, if not once a week. That was mission point number one. So we assembled this team of about 8 of us, Flores from engineering and Emily from RAD and Amit from finance. And we went around the org, Lexi from products, and said, we want to have at least one person from each core department represented here to have these conversations. Then we started to identify the power users. So like we were a ChatGPT enterprise client, you get analytics from that. You're quickly able to go and figure out like who are the power users within the org, and you tap them on the shoulder. You say, are you willing to help lean in, not just in terms of conversations we're having as to where we're going with our program, but also coaching people and raising your hand to do like self-guided teaching, even as to whether it's group sessions or one-on-ones, which is a lot of the phase that we're in right now, is a lot of like kind of one-on-one training, group sessions up on 8, on new tools, prototyping tools, everything that's coming out right now. So that was the first bucket, is just like providing some structure, providing some space, time in the calendar, and focus. Here was around the tool sets themselves. So everyone did like a quick survey of the land. We said, okay, we got to get ChatGPT Enterprise over the door. so that everyone here can be using it instead of shadow usage, or that every company is experiencing some degree of that with different tools. So that was first. Then we got into, okay, yeah, let's get the Zoom note recording tools going to make meetings more efficient. Great. Unlocking tools like Gemini within Google Workspace. Cool. And then we started getting into the second layer around like more team specific tooling. So for engineers, every engineer in the house here has Cursor now, which is great. We're doing a pilot with another company, JetBrains Juni, which is another agentic coding tool. So engineering is in a good place there. Then you're thinking about, okay, with design and products, let's get these prototyping tools approved. So this is the Replets, Lovable, Bold, and V0s of the world. Pilot. I know Figma, we watched their keynote at Config on Wednesday, and we have a call with them this afternoon to talk about their Maker tool and the sites one where you can take a design and put it in and it creates a website. A lot of stuff around the prototyping tools for product and product design. And then for teams like marketing and industrial design, there's some cool tools out there, Viscom, which can create 3D rendered new types of hardware that you might want to play around with. Or Kling, with everything what they're doing with video right now, is like super impressive. So we've been playing with that. I think one unique thing that we did that I would recommend other companies do if you don't do this already is we created this little personal beta program for tooling. So if you wanted to use a tool, obviously we're at a stage at Whoop's life where we need to actually get these tools approved by our GRC team, right? You can't just willy-nilly sign on and use any tool that you want. But we created an outlet for it. So we said, okay, we know everyone here is using tools outside of work on weekends and nights. That's great. Go and do that. We encourage you to do that, and we'll reimburse you for it. So if you want to use Replit, great, go use it. We'll reimburse you. Come back with a little one-pager report on where the benefit is here. Do you think we should approve this as a tool? If so, for who? What's the rollout plan? And just putting the power into the people's hands is like my main MO. I don't want this to be a department that survives for years on end, right? Like, to me, this is a project. This is like I don't know how long the project will last, but it's one of these things where I think we had to centralize it first to then decentralize it to everyone else. So that's a big second bucket. The third is really around the employee life cycle. So like when you think about, okay, the attraction stage, hiring stage, onboarding, developing your people, retention, or even offboarding, there's little things that you can do in every single one of those stages to have AI be like part of the culture rather than an add-on. So at the attraction stage, like we throw these great big events in town now, once a quarter, and I'm trying to push others in Boston to do the same. It's not a ton of dough to be able to get something like that stood up. You're paying for beer and pizza for people, but they've been pretty impactful events. We'll have like little panels of 3 to 4 people up on the floor. First one was around product and AI intersection, demoing products, which was a lot of fun. We're doing a robotics one in the fall, which is going to be a blast. We're trying to figure out who we want to have come and speak at those, but just trying to get out to the market the fact that like AI is not a afterthought here. It is something that we interview for. There were questions in the interview around AI as part of the calibration meetings afterwards in terms of whether we make the hire or not. In onboarding, there's a full-blown session around AI where we introduce you to the tooling, encourage you to use it. And if you don't start using it out of the gate, we know that we can go and spend more time with that individual to help them get ramped up. We're taking a really heavy hand in this to try to make sure that everyone gets up to speed. Obviously, like at the end of the day, it's up to the person whether or not they're going to embrace this AI age. But I really want to give everyone like the biggest chance of success in AI as humanly possible. That's like where my head is at right now.
Given that there's so many different tools out there and that different tools work better for different people and their way of learning, their way of engaging, and some of it is, oh, it needs to have this feature, it needs to have that, and some of it just comes down to just preference, the same way that coming from the fitness app world, for example, like some people preferred Runkeeper, some people preferred Strava, and it isn't necessarily that one's better and one's worse, it's that it's preference, right? Consumer preference. And so how do you manage honoring that preference with standardization? And also same question about individual productivity versus team productivity, given that in order for processes to change, it needs to change in a more unified way when a lot of the exploration is happening at the individual level.
Yep. Good question. On the tooling side, we do on the LLM side of things, like we do strongly encourage everyone here to use ChatGPT as the main LLM. I think what you've probably seen a good amount now about what's happening in the agentic space now, like having all of your chat combos as well as your centralized document hubs now in one place is becoming, I think, increasingly important. We're partnered with Box and Snowflake, and having data sets in one place that these agents that we're going to be starting to build actually very soon can go and access that information and all the permission control around that. We're right now at final stages with all these companies and trying to figure out, okay, how many seats do we get, monthly contract versus annual, all of that. But I also love Lovable because the design for Lovable is, as of right now, I think better than Replit. So we're probably going to do a bifurcation where we're going to allow a handful of people to pick their tool in the prototyping space, specifically because I think outside of Cursor, a lot of that work could end up being throwaway work, like purposely throwaway work. I am excited about the Figma AI stuff that came out this week. Like we're all on Figma here internally. So if that is what it looked like on, I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday, that will most likely be the one that we would lean in with the most, just because we've had like legacy with that over the past several years. But I look at something like a Replit and I say, okay, if you're going to stand up a new business line from scratch, Replit's pretty easy for a non-engineer to plug in immediately and get going on that. Cursor has here's a ramp-up curve to get programming in Cursor. Once you go over the curve, like I think that tool for us is going to be monstrously powerful, especially for all the engineers. But the long story short is I do want to give people some optionality. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we don't overspend in duplicating tool sets across people. What was the second question you had around?
Process. Yeah. It was around how do you adapt process, given that process it's almost like a conductor where all the pieces need to fit together when much of the exploration is happening at the individual level.
Yeah.
So different people are in different places across all the places that the process touches.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So one thing we did about 2 months ago, which I think was a good idea, is we created little subcommittees on each team. So there's now a group of 6 people on product and product design who are really responsible for leveling up that entire team's knowledge around AI. And beyond like a GRC process and everything around security, which we do follow like a very standard process for that, that's very purposely done in a way that we want to make sure that we're very buttoned up. Outside of that, in terms of training, we rely on these little subcommittees. We've got one for marketing. We've got one for engineering. The engineering team right now is trying to figure out, okay, in this world of MCP, like how does work change on a daily basis? They're responsible for that. As much as I would want to dive in there and say, we should do this, we should do that. I look at myself as more of the Jiminy Cricket, like the conscience on the shoulder, trying to help provide advice. But I don't want to be heavy handed in terms of you all should use these tools and here's why. Hope that answers the question.
It does. So I listened this morning to Will's keynote. I think it was half an hour or so,
Yep.
rolling out the new everything. And one of the things he was talking about is that this is not just a hardware upgrade. Like this is a rethinking of everything. And I want to take that back to org design and construct, because it sounds like the way you're doing it is far ahead of your peers in that you're pushing on it and incrementing in each place and then also incrementing on it across places. Do you think that's enough? Or at some point, will you need to take a step back and do the equivalent of what Will was talking about yesterday on the product side, but for the org?
Yep. Good question. I do think there will be a moment for most orgs where they will want and need to bring leadership around the table to say, let's re-envision how this thing looks over the next 12 to 24 months. I was going to say 5 years, but right now it's like, can't even predict 12 months.
It's like dog years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 12 to 24 months is
totally
5 to 10 years. Yeah.
How I think about a lot of this, and let's be real here, there is a ton of fear at the individual IC level in tech, even outside of tech, but in tech as to what happens to my job. What does my job look like? I quite frankly am like super optimistic and not pessimistic on that front. Like, obviously that's like my nature. Your nature is kind of the same way, but first thing I think will happen is like the roles will change, right? Like the 30 to 50% of the stuff that you're doing on a daily basis, the agents are going to automate that away and you're going to have that time back. And the question is, okay, what do you do at that time? And if you were, how I like to think about this is, okay, Whoop today, especially pushing more into this health space and our focus around unlocking human performance and health span, that opens up a lot of doors for employees to play in, right? You could picture a world where our company has individual employees like me or you who say, I want to start a full-blown product line and I want to do it with myself and 2 other people in here and go for it. Versus typically at a company of this stage, like that would take a lot of buy-in from the top, probably 10 to 20 people to organize around, if not more. I think we are going to see a lot of inception ideas that turn into full-blown product lines where you have these like mini GMs, mini founders within a company running around building the future of new verticals. That's the vision I like to think about, right? If you think about Alphabet, they've got Google and they've got YouTube and the Waymo's spin out, and there's just so many different opportunities that are all aligned to their mission. And I would think that most companies, that's included, would think about how to leverage their employee base and the agentic workforces to do that and bring our mission to more people or more machines. So that's where I'm spending some time right now is just, okay, take one role at a time. Like instead of trying to boil the ocean and try to do this for every single role in the entire company, pick one role and start to reimagine it. Let's bring new vernacular around the job itself and the job description to the point where if you were posting a job description for the role, it wouldn't look like what it looked like yesterday. And then how do we encourage people to become these full stack builders where they can go from idea to prototype to deploy code to A/B testing, iterations on that all themselves. Like that's where I want to push us. Probably because that's the type of personality I am. Like you're the same way. Like you could start a million things right now. But the real question is like, what do you want to start that you're actually going to be fulfilled by? And so I think there's also a bit of that like push for meaning. How do you take people who may not historically be founder profiles and go and start companies, but how do you encourage them to focus on one of those things that they really care a lot about within a company like Whoop and then go build it? Second piece I would say too is like internal tools, right? Everyone's talking about this now. We can automate away, hopefully, a lot of our third party spend and just to overall get teams and orgs and workflows talking to one another better through tools that we can probably build in Cursor on our own rather than buy. Those are the 2 things that come to mind.
As the future unfolds, and obviously neither of us and nobody has a crystal ball, but there's one world where the playing field gets leveled and barriers to entry are smaller and more companies start up and it becomes harder and harder to be a monopoly, right? And so it almost shrinks everything down closer together,
Yep.
right? And there's another world where it goes the opposite way, where there's more and more power concentrated in fewer hands, and it becomes less and less possible, just from a mathematics standpoint, to be a founder. Which future do you think we're going to see? And also, that could be a nuanced answer. Well, over here, it'll be this way, and over here, it'll be that way. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, good question. The multi-year out view, it's tough, man. I think for a Whoop, I want to see us help more people in the world. And so in my head, what it would look like here is more of that kind of Alphabet-esque approach where we're launching companies within the company and growing. I think companies in and around our stage that are like us, if they do the same thing, I think they'll be successful doing that. On the other side, I do less kind of like hyper-personalized consumer experience world. Like you and me both like consumer stuff. And when I know that I can go and build new features in Whoop on my own that could potentially someday go into the app, you could picture a world where you start to open up the protocol to other people, other creators, other companies, other builders, and every consumer experience could get super hyper-personalized.
A couple threads to pull on there. One is, like, I had Scott Weller on the show, who you probably know, or at least know of, and one of the things he was talking about was how the people on his team have 2 jobs. One job is all the daily stuff that they would have already had to do as a startup. And then the other job is nights and weekends, staying on top of how quickly the landscape is changing under their feet. And so on the one hand, it's, with these changes, it will free up time and give us time back and automate the mundane. But the reality is that's not what's happening, right? In order to keep up with how quickly everything's changing, you end up having to work double, right? So that's one thread. And then the other is, in a world where it's automated and you get your time back, like people talk about, so that means you can do more of what you love and less of what you don't, and you can get the same job done in less time, and then you'll have more free time to do this and that, right? But in a world where the companies that are powering the automation are capturing the lion's share of that value, then the people whose jobs ultimately get automated away, how do they provide, right? Do they just rely on handouts? Where does their purpose come from? And so I'm an optimist like you, but there are some pessimistic scenarios that I at least want to push on and think about, because we don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah. It is hard to think about a world where the whole universal basic income thing does not happen. Like every time I try to extrapolate down years and years down the road, I keep coming back to, Sam Altman wrote about this however many years ago in a paper, I forget what it was called, and I know that they did that study around universal basic income to try to put it in real world today's terms, but I don't think it's particularly relevant given that like we got to experience it and see it a few years from now for it to be real. But I do think we probably head more and more in that direction. Sometimes me and Rob Case talk a bit about these questions, and I think this just concept of money over time, I don't know, it starts to degrade in a world where these larger companies do start to gobble up more and more of the value. I do like this world picturing where people are spending more time building and doing the things that they want to do.
And by the way, all that is only going to make you more effective at helping evangelize and educate for your charter.
Absolutely.
Which is how I think about the stuff I'm heading out to build now. It's, what's the worst case? The worst case is that I become a lot more AI native, which helps inform my perspective on where the world is going and how to get there. So it's, even if it's not a business, it's like the best education I could possibly get. Like the speaking education like this is awesome, but it can't just be that. Like there's a certain education you can only get from building.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my main hope internally is that by us working with all employees here on a daily basis, if we can level up everybody's knowledge around this domain, and we're having conversations like this, like every day with hundreds of people internally here. So that's my main goal.
One confusing thing for me is that, I've been feeling the desire to be present for my family and be able to do fitness whenever I want and take care of myself and sleep enough and all that. So it's like, how can I put work above everything across all the things? Like, no. And then what people say back to me is like, that's just your life stage. Like, you're almost 49. And then you see the tweets from like the VC bros that are like, what I'm seeing, the best startups are now working 6-day weeks officially. And they even say in the interview process, if you don't sign on to that, because they know this is a moment in time, and if you don't go all in, you're going to miss the wave. And it's like bifurcated, right? It's on the one hand, there's people like me that are advocating for more balance and a life portfolio approach. And then on the other hand, you have people that are like going the other way, where it's like, it's going to be all consuming for a period of time, because when these big transitions come, that's what you need to do to get up on the wave.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My view on that, I definitely go through spurts where I will work aggressively. Like my life is very spiky. I feel like I will work aggressively and then I'll chill out for a while and decompress and think and figure out what I want to do next. So that's how I operate. But yeah, I like the approach of, I want to have a family. I want to spend a lot of time with my kids.
I think about this a lot, this whole concept of pedigree and credentials, because for me, in the path that I've chosen as a founder professionally, I feel like I wasn't actually, although I grew up very fortunate, I don't think I was particularly credentialed from what credentials Silicon Valley valued in its founders, and it hasn't mattered a lick. And at the same time, I find that with my kids, for example, credentials seem to matter everywhere we look. It's like they matter at each phase of schooling. They matter in athletics, like what club you play for and what tournaments you get invited to and stuff like that. What do you think the future is of pedigrees and credentials?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not a big credential guy.
It wasn't for me, and all of a sudden, like, my kids are on this credentialed path, and it's confusing, right? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that right? Because it'll open up so many doors for them if they graduate into the world which is the world's going to look different anyway. So it's, will it really open up those doors? What does the future look like? Like, I chase my own tail around about it. I don't have answers.
Yeah. I've heard this one around a bit. I think if you remove college as the goal for a kid and you just think about how do you help expose them to a ton of different things that they can get excited about things, but then also try to monetize those things and make a living. Like, credentials have historically helped in terms of like status games, but I don't know, man. I feel like it's pretty obvious at this point that a lot of this stuff right now happening in the collegiate education space is crumbling. It's been that way for a long time. And I think people are now like, okay, talking about it publicly, especially being in Boston, right? Like, we're surrounded by like some of the best colleges in the world. I do think there is a space for the MITs of the world at like that PhD level, even though even PhDs will be consumed by the machines, but as research institutions where they focus on science. I heard this on a podcast recently and I was like, I like that view of it. I think that's what what college ends up being, is like a combination of like research institutions rather than the study going to school to learn, when you can be doing that for your first 18 years of life and making a living. And then the second thing I think it will evolve into is almost like clubs. It would almost evolve into what the Quinn House is in downtown Boston, right? Or I know
that's a reference that only Bostonians will know.
Right. And like, I know,
and maybe it's just Boston tech people.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I know New York.
It's like the Battery of Boston, basically.
Yeah. Or this is Soho houses of the world.
Yeah.
I feel like colleges are going to evolve into that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big credential guy. I don't really care when someone says I went to XYZ school. I don't give a shit. Like, I went to UMass. So I don't care. It's more just like, what problem are you solving right now? What do you give a shit about? Why do you care? Like that. Look, like I was raised without a dad. Like, my mom is phenomenal. She's the best mom in the world, but also I want to spend a lot of time with my kids. And I like this kind of idea of being able to show them the world and be able to like these explorer navigators of the future.
I'd love to do a little role play here. And this is for selfish reasons, but I'm just in the early stages of essentially when you were talking about employees taking tiny teams or even just themselves and going and spinning up a new thing that could grow into a line of business, right? And your role within the company as like the Jiminy cricketer, like the coach or the person on their shoulder trying to help them see around corners and things like that. Pretend I'm that, because actually where I am with my thing actually aligns pretty well with what that potential hypothetical Whoop employee might be. So can I tell you what I'm thinking about and get some feedback? I'd value your opinion. Yeah, cool. The real reason why I do this show, get free consulting. Yeah, so I've been thinking about youth sports, and essentially I built Runkeeper for 8 or 9 years, and so I have experience in consumer fitness and know how hard it is and how much it sucks, but as a business. But I love the category, and I know it really well since I'm all wrapped up in it with my kids and see a lot of value in sports. But at any rate, the landscape when it comes to skill development, you cart the kids around to all this formal stuff in person, but if you try to do stuff on your own at home, there's a sea of crap online, and it's hard to sort through to find the quality. It's not personalized in any way. And there's also just no one thinking about kind of the holistic you. And so my thought, and it's also really fragmented. Each sport has its own kind of tools. There's no trusted brand across sports, even though under the hood, there's a lot of economies of scale that would come from the pulling together the content machine, the expertise, the analysis, the whatever, right? And so essentially, I'm thinking about building that platform of record that kids and families come to rely on to get better, right? At their sport of choice, right? Probably starting in one sport and expanding to more sports over time. But it's kind of part like getting to know you, what age you are, what ability level you are, where you're trying to get to, what you want to work on, and helping you tease out some goals and a game plan that are age and ability appropriate. And then it's, what do I do? And then it's, how do I do each of these things? And then it's, how am I doing against myself? How am I doing against others like me? Maybe there's an accountability element. So maybe it's like you and your teammates and your coach has access to it. I don't know. And there's also potential that, for example, if you take videos of yourself for accountability, that then it can train the model over time to get better and better at what the form should look like and how yours compares to others, and making recommendations to get better, et cetera. And the thought is, if it can be the platform of record that kids and families rely on to get better, then there'll be a lot of leverage and responsibility that comes with that position, much like with Runkeeper. Like, why did the category consolidate with the run keepers of the world, it wasn't because of the recurring revenue streams, right? It was because, one, it was a channel to sell, and two, it was a channel to understand what was happening with the consumers that these big shoe and apparel companies were building for, how to talk to them, what kind of products they want, how they're using these products, when they're using these products. Are they doing it alone? Are they doing it with others? Are they listening to music? Are they not? What's motivating to them? What's not, right? And so I just see this kind of big in youth sports for someone to build an enduring platform of record to help young competitive athletes get better.
Very cool.
So
very cool.
Yeah.
Is the thesis behind it that, like, I was a 3-sport athlete growing up: soccer, basketball, baseball, then became a distance runner. But is the concept based around the fact that children getting better in a specific sport or multiple sports helps them later in life adapt to the world? Is it more around, okay, if you built a platform that, let's say, did aggregate all their biometric data across different devices, had journaling and kind of goal tracking and the gamification layer of all of that put into an experience that would help someone just get better in their domain? Is this more, I guess my question is this more around excelling in the specific sport, or is it more of a holistic kind of life? Like, by doing sport and competitive sport, you become a better human over time.
This is the question of the day, right? Because youth sports is completely off the rails, right?
Yeah.
It is. There's a whole economy around it. The way that kids and families get pushed is oftentimes more about dollars than it is about the best interest of kids. Yep. And then it's all kind of ties together with, if you look at prep school, for example, right? There's a whole business around prep school, and the two are interrelated. Like, it's getting more and more competitive, harder and harder for anyone to rise above the noise, leads to earlier specialization, overscheduled kids, right? So all of that is real. I think the flip side is that I just look with my own kids. It breeds good habits. It breeds confidence. It teaches them how to set a goal and then break it down into sub goals and work towards achieving it. And also how to pick off different areas to work on to achieve mastery, and how you can achieve sub-mastery in each of these different areas. And then when they come together, it makes the overall machine hum faster. And it's just like fun memories, friendships, experiences. And it's like experiences that are in a more productive way than just like taking a trip. But your questions are more around the philosophical. So I think that is a very valid discussion to have. I think the assumption I'm making is, in today's world, there are kids and families who are, so probably not the youngest kids, right? These are kids that are like either in high school or approaching high school, I would say, who are starting towards specialization, who are doing a lot, who are in a hyper-competitive world, who are getting dragged around by their parents to all this different stuff that is a big tax on the kid and the parent. In terms of just the actual time of the stuff is great, but then in between, it's like there's a lot of time rotting in the car. It's expensive, right? It's a tax on the employment of that parent because they have a harder and harder time fitting in. And then there's a whole wave of parents that would want access to this like specialized instruction that can't because it's just too expensive, or they don't have jobs that are flexible enough. And then when the kid's at home, a lot of this stuff, you don't need a ton of equipment, right? And the kids have been carted around for years. They know what to do, right? But when they're home, they're not doing it. And it's, why aren't they doing it, right? It's because it's like, why do they like it when it's in person? They like it because there's accountability. They like it because their friends are there. They like it because they get competitive. They like it because it's like a game. They like it because they like seeing their progress over time. They like it because someone's telling them what to do, and they don't have to go brain dead trying to figure out what they should do that day. And so and then at home, there's evidence of it. They get that way about the video game in the house, and they're playing with their friends and they're competitive, or the fantasy sports. And so can you tap into that like video game or fantasy sports energy, but in a way that gets them to eat the skills training equivalent of eating their vegetables? Can you package vegetables in a way that are delicious? That's what I'm thinking.
I'm already picturing the experience right now, just from you even talking about it. I feel like you're already well on your way. Have you tried prototyping it yet with any of the tools?
It's funny. So I'm doing a draft right. Every Friday I send out my weekly updates, right? And so I think it's going to be week 23. And if you look back, they're all posted online. Probably nobody reads them, right? But if you look back online, what you'll see is that at each one, it's like, how to build different. And then it's like two sports off to the side. And then it's AI, where's the world going? How's it going to change how we work and live? How's it going to change how startups are built and funded? And then it's like youth sports, right? It's like youth sports is off to the side, but is quietly sitting there like in every freaking update. And then keep coming. And and by the way, another cool thing is that I spend so much of my time with my older boy in youth sports. Now his little sister's coming up. So she was just invited to the top team in her club or whatever for next year. And I'm very proud of her. But now she's like begging me, can I do the daily drills like my brother? Right. And her brother's, shoot, we have prep school coming up. I got to hunker down. Now's the time. Okay, let's dial it up at home. And I'm like, dude, don't say it if you don't mean it. Yeah. And then I tell them about what I'm thinking of building. And they're like, oh, can we help? And I wanted to expose them to entrepreneurship anyways. Wow, this is like the driving range for entrepreneurship in a way that's like directly relevant to their day-to-day and my day-to-day. Wow, this could be threading like the perfect needle. So just in the last week, right, I've started, like I spent most of the week this week not recording like this and thinking about, all right, where do I start? Do I start by assembling a library of drills and categorizing them by which area you're working on, and then identifying what are the key areas that matter, and then cross-referencing that with age and ability level, and then maybe have some type of onboarding flow and play matchmaker? Does it start text only, where it's just like you enter something about yourself and then it tells you what to do each day? Does it start by providing a library and then enabling you to search and find your own answers? Does it in that form out of the gate? How important is natural language? Should it just be an onboarding survey like we grew up with, or should it actually have natural language like what Colin Rainey's doing with Ray, where it's like you just talk to it like ChatGPT and it just learns without you having to fill out any forms. And I don't know. And then it's, should I be spending my time wrestling with these tools, or should I just go get a co-founder? So I am living it, but I'm at the beginning of the journey. And I said that I'm going to depressurize it. Like worst case, I just get a lot more AI native. But then it slipped out today in an email for the first time that it's like I'm in the early stages of starting a new company in this area. So I don't know yet if I am. I haven't officially declared, but gosh, there's just a lot of parallels to what I did with Runkeeper, and it's so relevant to this stage of my life and my kids' life that it's like I'm just feeling ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you clearly care a lot about it, so that's where it all starts, man. Dude, you should go and build this. Take the crack at the bat on those prototypes and just get some things out there. I'm happy to shoot the shit with you about them too and just kind of react. But
I'm doing it. I think that what I'm working through now is the how, right? But it's like I just crossed the threshold of serious enough to actually like fight through the frustration and just wrestle with the tools until I like get through the other side. And that's actually, I haven't been in this mode in probably since with 2A Labs in between Runkeeper and MCJ, but really I haven't sat down to build a product in as long as I can remember. It feels really exciting.
Yeah, that's great, man. I love it. Yeah, the macro point that I like about what you were just talking about is, to bring it back to the education piece, is the future of education. I don't think is going to start from evolving the book side of it. I feel like it's more in the play realm and the sport realm. And I like the combination of that and trying to think about how to bring that entrepreneurial piece together with it. That's where I would spike on that. But yeah, man.
You know what's weird is that I was a terrible student and I had real trouble sitting in a lecture. And even if it's a topic I cared about, it's just the speaking one-to-many where you just sit there passively and you're supposed to listen, absorb, and take notes. Like it's just my ADD brain. Like I can't do it. But like these one-on-one discussions, I listen intently and I learn so much. And if somehow my education could have been packaged in the way I've been learning with these podcasts, like I would have been a straight A student. 100%. And like, that's not saying that's how education should be. It's more about the personalization. It's figure out the weird hacks to get you to kind of dial in and get serious and then just feed that all day long. Instead of trying to get people to adapt to the system, right? I feel like increasingly we don't need to do that. And also it's just, that's not they may be able to do it for some period of time, but then they're going to fall right back on their old habits over time because you're wired how you're wired.
I'm going to figure out all this soon. I got no kids right now, but hopefully soon.
Well, thanks for coming on. I guess I'll ask you a couple questions. One, just from a big picture standpoint, in terms of these macro topics we were wrestling on, is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words in that regard?
I don't think so. Let me think. No, I don't think so.
And then with your Whoop hat on, just if there's any calls to action, any key hires you're trying to make, if there's other companies you want to hear from that are doing X, Y, like just anything might be helpful to what you're trying to do.
My plug is go get a Whoop. Go to whoop.com. You can go on there and pick out the right membership for you. There's different tiers, 1 Peak Light, Life is more focused on,
It has everything PCAS plus.
yeah.
Okay.
And one,
Yeah, because I went straight for the life because I'm old enough that my doctor tells me to monitor my blood pressure.
totally.
So.
Yeah. And one is $199, so you can't really beat that. But that's my plug. Whoop.com. Go there and start taking your health seriously, everybody.
Wait, and I heard you refer to yourself as Durkin. I called you Ryan at the beginning of the show.
No, it doesn't matter.
I
I feel like it's like a baseball thing. Like everyone called me Durkin as a kid playing sports, and so it just stuck. But yeah, no, Ryan's fine.
Okay. Ryan or Durkin, this was an awesome discussion. I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to keep the dialogue going, both with your Whoop hat on and as you're banging on side projects using some of the same tools as me. And yeah, I learned a ton. Hopefully that means listeners do as well. And thank you so much for making the time to do this.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. Good seeing you after all these years.
Thank you for tuning in to The Next. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player. In addition to the podcast, which typically publishes weekly, there's also a weekly newsletter on Substack at thenextnext.substack.com. That's essentially for weekly accountability of the ground I'm covering, areas I'm tackling next, and where I could use some help as well. And it's a great area to foster discussion and dialogue around the topics that we cover on the show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.